I want you to watch this clip of Ben Shapiro talking about the origins of the Palestinian cause and what happened from the inception of the Palestinian Liberation Organization in 1964, because he busts a lot of myths and he tells the facts as they are. People that assume Israel is the dominant aggressor and the Palestinians just want just one little state of their own. It's actually quite the opposite. Have a look at this clip of Ben telling us about some of the key facts.
By 1964, the Arab states have decided that they need almost a propaganda effort here. So they create the Palestine Liberation Organization. The Palestine Liberation Organization is a terrorist group. It explicitly calls for the destruction of Israel. Now you will note, at this point, Israel does not control any of this or any of this. So when they say Palestine Liberation Organization, they mean this whole thing, right? That whole thing is supposed to go away because Israel doesn't even control that at that point. And they're not calling for Palestine to be liberated from Jordan or from Egypt. They're calling for the complete destruction of the state of Israel. Okay, so in 1967, the Arabs mobilized for all-out war. And this includes Egypt, it includes Jordan, it includes Saudi, it includes Syria. This is going to be the big war where they finally get rid of this nascent Jewish state that is less than 20 years old, right? And this is just less than 3 decades after the Holocaust. And Israel instead launches a preemptive war. They see this coming. They destroy the entire Egyptian Air Force on the ground. And in 6 days, they proceed to take the Golan Heights, which is this area of Syria. Israel takes over the entire Sinai Desert, takes all of Judea and Samaria to the Jordan River, takes all of the Gaza Strip, takes control of the old city of Jerusalem. Right? They do all of this in 6 days, which is why it's considered a miracle by the state of Israel. I mean, it's an unbelievable military performance. So in 6 days, they take what was going to be the war for their destruction, and they proceed to expand their borders from this tiny thing to this, and all of this. Israel then proceeds to give up like all of it, right? So Israel keeps the Golan Heights because that's a military necessity. The UN calls for Israel to withdraw from occupied territories. Now, the language here matters if you care about the UN. I don't happen to care about the UN. I think it's a garbage organization. But if you do care about the UN, there's a resolution put forward by the UN Security Council. It calls for Israel to withdraw from occupied territories, not the occupied territories. Now, that makes a difference because if it said the occupied territories, presumably it would mean anything Israel won, it would have to withdraw from if you care about the UN, which you really shouldn't. But it says occupied territories, which means subject to negotiations. The 67 Arab League summit happens, and they agree in Khartoum, Sudan, on the 3 no's. No peace, no recognition, no negotiations. And these are the 3 no's that are going to govern the Arabs all the way through. Basically until now, until the Abraham Accords. These were the 3 no's that mattered. And this is all the way in 1967. So whenever people talk about there needs to be a 2-state solution, why couldn't they have come to an agreement? Because literally one side said there will be no peace, no recognition, and no negotiations. One side has accepted every single peace deal provided to it to this point in time. And one side has said we will not accept any peace deal. And yet somehow there's a moral equivalency between the 2 sides. Explain that one. Okay, 73, holiest day of the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur. Everybody is fasting, everybody is praying, and a surprise attack is launched on the state of Israel. The prime minister is Golda Meir. She gets caught completely by surprise. They were warned, and they didn't take it seriously. Israel suffers extraordinary casualties in the 73 Yom Kippur War, and then once again maintains or expands its borders a little bit. 79, Camp David Accords. Finally, there's a breakthrough. Menachem Begin takes over as prime minister of Israel, a very right-wing prime minister. There were 2 major parties in Israel at this time, Likud and Labor. This is the first Likud prime minister. And one of the things that he does is he comes to a peace accord with Anwar Sadat, who is the nationalist leader of Egypt. And in those peace accords, Israel gives up the entire Sinai Desert. Israel gives up the entire thing to Egypt in return for basically a cold peace. Anwar Sadat is then assassinated. In 1982, the Jordanian monarchy is deeply afraid that the Palestine Liberation Organization is going to overthrow the monarchy. They expel the Palestinians. The Palestinians end up in Lebanon, tens of thousands of Palestinians. Palestinian terrorist groups begin firing rockets over into Israel from South Lebanon. In 1982, Menachem Begin launches a war in Lebanon. Israel ends up basically going all the way up to the capital of Beirut and nearly occupying the entire country. And then they end up withdrawing under international pressure in what is considered sort of a disastrous war for the state of Israel. As always, whenever Israel withdraws from a territory, terrorist groups take over and then threaten Israel. This is the constant pattern. No matter, the only time this has not happened is with regard to withdrawal from the Sinai Desert. 1980.
So we'll get into more of this later, but are you noticing a pattern here? There's a constant eliminationist ideology on the Arab side to want to get rid of the Jews, get rid of the state of Israel. It's been pretty constant. Maybe they'd be happy for Jews to live as second-class persecuted citizens, as dhimmis or whatever, but that's been the general pattern here. We want to eliminate the Jewish state. Israel then responds and is militarily victorious. And then the Arabs start saying, well, we're defeated basically, so let's go to the negotiating table. And Israel ends up giving back land. And then what happens? They get more terrorism and military aggression. We're seeing the pattern here. And it's interesting, even with Egypt, when people say, well, we got a peace deal with Egypt after giving away the Sinai Peninsula. Well, did we get peace? Or did we get a ceasefire? How is Egypt acting with regard to our war against Hamas in Gaza right now? We just found out there's something like 50 tunnels from Egypt into Gaza that were recently exposed that were funneling weapons to Hamas. Egypt not showing any cooperation or willingness to take in the Arabs in Gaza so that Israel can finish off the job more easily against Hamas. Whichever conflict you look at throughout its history, it seems to be that whenever Israel shrinks and gives away territory, it just incentivizes and encourages the enemy and those who see weakness and want to pounce on it. What did it show the Arabs when Israel left Gaza? Unilaterally. Robert Oman, an Israeli Nobel Prize winning economist, the founder, I believe, of game theory, he said this just shows them if you push us enough, we'll collapse. We'll give in. It showed weakness. And what did we get? We got October 7th. It all comes down to this ultimately. Is the Palestinian cause based on a legitimate grievance, or is it ultimately based on a hateful ideology? That's what it all comes down to. If it's a legitimate grievance, then, well, we've got to keep going to the negotiating table, find out a way to compromise, because they've got a point. We are guilty to some extent. We've seen, if you can't look objectively at history now and look just recently at what's happened now, and not realise that this was never about a legitimate grievance, that the entire cause was just about a hateful ideology that cannot make space for a Jewish state, then you'll understand that this is not something that you should try to appease. This is not something that you should show any weakness towards or any compromise with, because actually all it does is makes the problem fester. Talking about two-state solution, you say, yeah, you're right, we're guilty. Yes, maybe you've got a point. Maybe you have some rights to parts of the land. And it sends all the wrong signals. And we've tried it, and it's failed. They never wanted a two-state solution because that's not what has been motivating them. That's not the ideology that's been motivating them. It's based on a hateful ideology that existed even before Israel came into being. Whether it was Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the spiritual leader of the Arabs in the land, who met with Adolf Hitler. Whether it was the Hebron massacre in the 1920s. And so therefore, if you're dealing with a hateful ideology, like let's say we dealt with in World War II, against the Nazis, we learned that appeasement doesn't work because, yes, they really are evil. They really do want world domination. It may sound crazy to some people, but that's the truth. And the more you try to deny that, the more the problem grows. So if we understand that the only way that you deal with this is through strength, and not through shrinking, and not through appeasing, but being absolutely, utterly uncompromising in being bold, strong, hardline against the terror, against the eliminationist, hateful ideology, then that's going to be the path to victory. It's become so clear. It's become so clear now. You know, many of the people that were murdered, mutilated, taken hostage on October 7th were the left-wing peaceniks that were providing support to the people of Gaza, that were hiring them, working with them, giving them medical support, desperately seeking peace. And And what do they get in response? Kill the Jews. So, we've tried the approach of appeasement, and we've seen it doesn't work. And Israel is waking up to this, even the Israeli youth. We can't afford to indulge in delusion any longer because it costs lives. Study history, study the present, and it will tell you all you need to know. Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.